This is Movie Tone. Lionel Gamlin reporting our review of 1951. At the beginning of the year, mankind was still wondering how the Korean War was to be ended. Historically, this remote conflict, in which the free world and communism were pitted against one another on a scale limited by tacit understanding, must seem the biggest event of 1951. The fortunes of battle veered to and fro. Pushed back below the 38th parallel by the Chinese, who had come to the aid of the North Koreans, the United Nations forces reasserted themselves and flung the enemy back across the parallel again. In the summer, truce talks began at Kaesong, but dragged on and on and on, through disagreement as to where the truce line should be drawn. And while the parleys went on, the fighting continued. The Gloucesters gained new military laurels in a stand which broke up the communist spring offensive, and Commonwealth troops generally acquitted themselves nobly in the cause of the United Nations. To some, the dropping of General MacArthur, the Supreme Commander, was the most amazing aspect of the Korean War. Dismissed by President Truman, he returned to the United States, where he was hailed as a hero in every big city of the country. The General addressed Congress, describing himself as
an old soldier who tried to do his duty as God gave him the light to see that duty. Good luck.
The situation in Malaya, where Britain was at war with communist bandits, instead of improving, got worse. The British High Commissioner, Sir Henry Gurney, was ambushed and killed. The death of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Liaquat Ali Khan, was also due to an assassin's hand. And it was the assassination of the Prime Minister of Persia which brought to power that strange but subtle man, Dr. Mossadeq, who, from his bedroom, succeeded in ejecting the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company from its £500 million oil refinery at Abadan. Dr. Mossadeq, of course, was considerably assisted by the demonstrations of the mob in Tehran. On the instructions of the British government, who owned more than half of the oil company's shares, all British employees were evacuated to the safety of Britain. The example of Persia was infectious, and Egypt, whose King Farouk had just come back from a splendid honeymoon in Europe, decided to get rid of the British too. This was not so easy, because the British in this case were soldiers and airmen sitting astride the Suez Canal, while the threat of Russian interest in the maneuver was more remote. It was, however, an unpleasant situation with plenty of ugly incidents. To be a British Foreign Secretary, in fact, was no sinecure in 1951, as Herbert Morrison found. He had succeeded to the position in the spring owing to the illness of Ernest Bevin, whose subsequent death was a source of sorrow to every admirer of sterling qualities. A source of pride and joy to millions of ordinary people was the Festival of Britain, with the South Bank exhibition as its focus. The Shot Tower, Concert Hall, Skylon and Dome became familiar landmarks of the London skyline, and citizens of the capital learned to be conscious of their river again. Upstream at Battersea, they had all the fun of the fair in the Festival Gardens, with its amusement park, which is to reopen next year when the rest of the festival's features are mere memories. Now for sport. Australia retained the Ashes, but the MCC showing gave promise for future years. Oxford sank in the university boat race, while Cambridge produced a crew which subsequently took on Yale and Harvard in America and beat them both. 3 horses completed the Grand National course, the winner being Nickel Coin. Newcastle triumphed in an exciting English Cup final. Arctic Prince came through to win a superb derby. The boxing world was electrified by the emergence of a new British world champion, Randolph Turpin, who lost the title within a few months but kept the respect of all sportsmen. The political atmosphere had become charged with possibilities when Mr. and Bevin resigned from the Labour government. The uneasy situation continued until October, when Mr. Attlee decided to go to the country. The night of polling day witnessed the usual excited scenes in places of public assembly, where the results, as they came through, were shown on slides thrown on screens. Conservatives, although behind on the night, had won enough seats to catch up and pass the Labour Party on the following day. Smaller than Tories had hoped for, but Mr. Churchill was in a position to form a government with a working majority. Thus, he returned as Prime Minister after 6 years in opposition. Mr. Anthony Eden became Foreign Secretary again. During the British general election, Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh had been visiting Canada. Their tour took them to all the great cities of the Dominion, and in each they received overflowing testimony of the affection and loyalty of the Canadian people. They saw all the wonders of that vast country, the majesty of Niagara Falls, the magnificence of the Rocky Mountains, and they paid a lightning visit to Washington, where they were the guests of President Truman. On their return home, there was a delightful family reunion. And at a Guildhall luncheon, Princess Elizabeth said this:
I am happy to be back in England, and glad to be in this historic and beloved city, which I have known all my life. But my heart, too, is very full of another country, a country which is on its way to being one of the greatest in the world.
The deterioration had been masked by his unfailing sense of duty, which always found him carrying out his engagements, but it couldn't fail to be remarked at the ceremony of the Garter in the summer that His Majesty was undoubtedly far from well. Nevertheless, the public was hardly prepared. Movietone hopes in 1952 to show many more pictures of the King restored to health and fulfilling again those royal duties which he and the Queen discharge with so much dignity, humanity and devotion.